we live in infinite abundance. Everybody can be very wealthy and very rich and very comfortable in their lives, but we don't operate from that belief.
What are the common myths about creating abundance?
First of them is that you can save to become wealthy. You can save your way to wealth. It just takes a long time. There are more millionaires who stayed in jobs than people who became entrepreneurs.
What are some of the hardest spiritual principles to accept when creating money in one's life?
That you're always fairly compensated. People go, no, that's not true. I'm working so much harder. I should be making more money. And what I have learned to recognize is...
What advice would you give to people who feel guilty or conflicted about their desire for wealth?
You got to ask yourself,
are rich people just lucky?
It's actually not true at all. It's just they have a really good practices or set of practices that they have around. The first set of practices is what I call 3 L's. First L is...
How does one attract money into their lives?
Well, the way attraction works or creation of wealth works on a spiritual level, if I may, is that if you really think about ourselves, we are people who are two primary things that really affect our everyday activity, and that is our thoughts and our feelings. And really effectively, in practical terms, that's what really affects anything that we do. If you are in a state of love or above, or you're feeling love or above, you tend to take better actions. You tend to take actions with better intention. You tend to actually take actions. Versus if you are vibrating on a lower emotional level or a lower frequency or emotions of a lower frequency like hate, anger, frustration, you do take actions, but they're not from a place where it's creative. It's more reactive. It's more responsive. It is to put somebody else down instead of creating something that's more powerful. So Dr. David Hawkins is a researcher who did this phenomenal case study and has this thing called scale of consciousness, I think is what it's called, where he laid up on how your consciousness operates at different levels based on the feelings that your emotional states that you're being in. And he said anger and frustration, shame, all these are lower scales of consciousness, and love and above are higher scales of consciousness or states of consciousness. And so the more higher the state of consciousness, the more bigger your vibration. And also, the second function that I find interesting for anybody's consciousness or being able or ability to create and attract wealth and abundance comes from the thought that they're having on a day-to-day basis. See, feelings affect thoughts, and thoughts affect feelings. So there's a correlation to that. But effectively, your thoughts are, or most of our thoughts, if we are not present to the moment, come either from our past stories, so past blocks, if I may call them that, or from a future fear that we may have. So if you were to really imagine, let's say I am like a stick figure instead of just Ajit as a person, right? So if you go, I have thoughts from my past, so let's frame this as the past, and this is the future, fear of the future. If I have limiting blocks and fears that are blocking me, at any given time when my vibration is swinging, which is kind of what a field of consciousness is, field of consciousness is getting limited within the frame of the blocks and the fears that I have. The more I remove the blocks, the more I tackle with my fears or know how I deal with my fears, the bigger my state of consciousness, the bigger my vibration. And same is true for if my emotions, let's say that is coming from your heart, right? Your thoughts are in your head. Let's assume heart has all the feelings and emotions, not necessarily from a biological point of view, but from an energetic point of view, right? So if I am on a higher vibration of feeling, I am moving up the state of consciousness that I'm emitting from. So my vibration is bigger because of that. And if I can tackle the thoughts and I can tackle the fears, my breath or my field of consciousness is also expanding. Mm-hmm. And bigger my field of consciousness, easier it is for me to attract anything in life, not just money, but also abundance of love, abundance of friendships, abundance of opportunity, abundance of whatever that is that I desire is able to be created more because my thoughts and fears are not holding me back, and my emotions on a day-to-day basis are also not sabotaging my ability to tackle my thoughts and my fears. Now, how do we really do that? So there's the simplest path to increasing your vibrational frequency is stop thinking that your past and your future impacts anything, right? If we can get present to just this moment and own this moment, we know that we can get in the highest state of vibration because there is no past, so there is no blocks from the past. In this present moment, you are who you are, and that's pretty much it. And you can operate from the field of awareness of this is it, right? So your past doesn't hold you anymore, and your future cannot block you because you're not fearful of it because you're completely present to what is, right? So your past and your future kind of disseminates, it disappears because you are completely in the present. And because you're completely in the present, you can change your emotional state by taking some practical actions. Just something as simple as being grateful for your life right now, being able to breathe, being able to do a conversation, have a conversation that's meaningful, doing work that you're passionate about, or whatever it might be. It allows for your emotional state to go up. You start to feel more love. You start to feel more joy. And because you feel more joy and more love, and your past and your future is not really holding you back, in this moment, your frequency goes much broader and your vibration becomes much bigger. So on an energetic level, or if you have to think about from energetic or spiritual way of connecting with money, you would understand that if you suspend that past and the future, and if you can suspend that emotional state and get into the right kind of emotional state, abundance becomes easier. Now, if you really think about it, this is all metaphysical, right? So you can go, oh, this just is in your head. It's you coming up with this theory. It doesn't mean anything. Let's think about it practically, all right? If practically you can be 100% at all given times present to the opportunity that is in front of you, would you be more abundant? Well, the answer is obviously yes, because you are 100% present to it. You're not held back. You're not wondering if this works or it doesn't work. You're just doing the act and enjoying the act as you're doing it from a place of love and connection, joy and giving and contribution and so forth. All of that we know for any human being that wants to create abundance, practically, psychologically, you know that's a better state to work in, right? That's just a better state to work in. I mean, you work angry, you want work happy. What's a better work? Usually it's the happy work, right? So with that understanding, psychologically, you tend to create better work, better impact in the world, better connection with people around you. And all of that leads to more abundance.
So I know you mentioned spirituality. So can money and spirituality coexist, or are they fundamentally at odds with one another?
Money has no disassociation with spirituality. The context that often is established between spirituality and money being two ends is often from religion. And religion had certain narratives that were written at the time that religion's documents or the books were written that are the holy texts of it. And in that context, those statements made sense. Like, for example, in the Bible, it said, love for money is the root of all evil. Right now, people have amended that to say money is the root of all evil as well sometimes, and that's incorrect. First of all, it was the love for money that was the root of all evil. And the time Bible came into existence, or at least I know of coming into existence, the people who had money tend to have slaves. They tend to be kind of evil to people around them. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean money was evil. It was people who had money at the time were evil. And they were evil from the point of view that they lived in, the way they grew up, the situation, the society they got around them. It doesn't mean money had anything to do with it. It had everything to do with the people that had the control of money at the time. Now, the good thing that has happened in 2024 when we are having this conversation is that that's not the case anymore. We are a lot more human generally as people because we have connected with each other a lot more. We have traveled a lot more. We have given opportunities to a lot more people. Most of the people that are in power were not in power 50 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago. More millionaires are created out of people who have no background of money. They were not wealthy. Their parents were not wealthy. They didn't grow up wealthy. That effectively means that they have a really good connection with humanity as such. They're dissociated from it so much they can't understand the plight of another human being. So this whole spirituality and money being two different things or being at odds with each other is a story of the past. If you really think about spirituality, making money is an act of spirituality because making money is a byproduct of action that you've done in favor of society. Mm. You make money only when you do something for society, right? You don't get money just by sitting around. That's just not how it works. Maybe you can get a lottery by that, but that's 1 in a billion people or something like that, right? So, but most of the money that is generated or anybody that got wealthy did something for society. Now, was it a good thing or a bad thing? Depends on the person, right? And depends on the lens you're looking at it from. Because often what may look wrong to some people looked right to the person when they were doing it. I'm not saying they're always morally and ethically correct, but sometimes from their point of view, they seemed like, or they thought so, that what they were doing was correct, right? So while not trying to give them a out here, what I'm really suggestive of is that money is a function of, spirituality or your spirituality or anybody's spirituality. You only get money when you're in an expression of your spirituality. whatever that might be, because you are doing something for society. And because what you did for society, the society valued it, and they said you should be rewarded for it.
So what are some of the hardest spiritual principles to accept when creating money in one's life?
I think the hardest ones that I've found for people to accept is firstly that you're always fairly compensated. Now, why do I say that? Because when I say when you're always fairly compensated, people go, no, that's not true. I'm working so much harder. I should be making more money.
Right.
I should have more money. Why am I not making more money? And what I've learned to recognize is that you may be working really, really hard, but what you're working on, how you're working on it, is what really determines how much you will actually make. And universe will always reward you very fairly, very fairly. Even if you think, no, but Ajit, I've been doing 12-hour days, 15-hour days. It doesn't, all work is not equal. All skill is not equal. And you need to learn how to work with that energy to be able to be rewarded more. There's a little caveat of a story that I want to share to kind of make, to help understand what does that even mean and how does it really implement in somebody's life. So there was a time in my life where I had decided that I want to be the CEO of Mindvalley. I said, you know what, I was about maybe 28 or something. I was a kid in the company who had joined maybe 3 years ago at that time. And we do this wonderful thing called the 3 most important questions, where we answer questions like contribution, experiences, and opportunities that one person would like. And one of the things that I was like, what I really want to have an opportunity or an experience in my life was to be the CEO of a company that I really love and appreciate. And that was Mindvalley. At the time, I was working for the company. And so I wrote that down, my 3 most important questions. What it did was it created a gap in my practical life, because in my practical life, I recognized that to be the CEO of Mindvalley, or to be the CEO of any company really, you have to ask yourself, why should you be rewarded that position, right? And that brings you the awareness of that you are always rewarded where you are right now. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Right?
Yeah, but say more.
And at the same time, what you do is you go, okay, if I want to be rewarded like a CEO of a company, I must become the CEO before I will be rewarded.
So this is about really embodying the person that you want to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
You need to feel that feeling. You need to take the actions. You need to behave as if you were in a position of CEO of a company, let's say hypothetically in this scenario, right? And what it did for me is, because I had that gap, I recognized to be the CEO of any company, you must have an understanding of the entirety of the organization, because you'll be in charge of the entirety of the organization. You cannot be a specialized person in a small field and hope that I should be rewarded like a CEO. You won't be, because you are not qualified for it. You haven't done the effort, work, and energetic movement to be able to recognize yourself to that position. And so with that understanding, I said, okay, so that means I must do everything that a CEO must be able to do, right? And that was firstly to fully understand the organization. And that made me very interested in all the other dimensions of the organization without any expectation that it will take me 3 years or 30 years to become the CEO of the company. I didn't have a time expectation. I had the expectation or want, not even expectation, it was a want of wanting this experience for myself to run a company that I really, really admire. And so for the next 2-3 years, what I would end up doing is every 6 months, every 8 months, or every 12 months or so, depending on which title it was, I would hop between different roles in the company. I would go in and I would say, seems like there are a lot of things broken in technology. Can I go fix it? Now, I was not a technological person, but I had a great management skill. I could talk to anyone and really rile up a team behind it while I didn't understand any code. But I didn't need to understand code. What I needed to understand was to build relationships with people that otherwise knew I don't know anything about their work. But all I did was to manage their schedule and to become the defender of their schedule and make sure that they had the capacity to deliver, right? Then I took the role of the launch manager, the chief marketing officer, the chief operating officer. And eventually, when it came time to choose a CEO, guess who was the obvious choice?
You.
Right, because I understood everything.
Yeah.
And I knew, and I was already operating kind of like the CEO even before I had the title of CEO. And so the interesting point, or the curiosity one must have, is if I'm being compensated anything, it is probably a fair compensation. It also does one more thing. You stop to hate everything around you, which is probably more important than anything, because lack never creates abundance.
Right.
Right? The moment you go, you know what, I'm not being paid enough for this, You've already created a lack in your field. You operate from that lack. If you operate from that lack, your consciousness, your vibration is going to be of lack, and you can't attract abundance from lack.
So what do you do if you're not being fairly compensated? How do you...
You're always fairly compensated.
Okay, so it's the belief that I am always fairly compensated.
You're all from a universal point of view.
Okay.
From a universal spiritual point of view, you're always fairly compensated. If you're saying my manager is a dick and that's why I'm not fairly compensated, apply for another job. It's very simple. And you will know in about 5 minutes or about 5 applications down that if you're fairly compensated or not. It's very simple.
Yeah.
Let's say, for example, you go, you know what, this is not enough. All right, go try another job. Apply for it. Apply for 5 of them. And if all of them are about paying you the same amount of money or are not willing to pay you anything more than what you're being compensated right now, you're being fairly compensated. It's not your manager, it's you.
Yeah.
See, the point really of a lot of spiritual principles is to come to awareness that you are at the place in time that you don't have to subject yourself to psychological torture because of the stories you tell yourself. That's the point of spirituality a little bit, is that you can lean into something that is greater than your mind, right? Because you're always psychologically torturing yourself if you really think about yourself.
Yeah.
Like if you tell yourself a story, like for example, somebody telling themselves, what if I'm really not being fairly compensated? Well, go check it out. Most individuals won't check it out and keep complaining about they're not being fairly compensated. And isn't that true?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if that is true, what is really happening? You're just psychologically torturing yourself and thinking universe doesn't have your back. Neither of those beliefs is helping you create more abundance for yourself.
Yeah.
Right? It's same for love. It's same for anything. Any abundance that you seek, it always must come from a place of acceptance. Because once you accept, you can create movement. Believing and understanding that the universe will always fairly compensate you is something that allows you to create movement in your life. Here's another thing to think, another kind of thought experiment, right? The moment you recognize that, I am fairly compensated, right? You would start to ask, what do I need to do so I am compensated what I want to get compensated?
Oh, that's a great question.
Right?
Yeah.
So because you go, okay, I'm fairly compensated. This is what I'm probably meant to be getting right now. What do I need to do? Now you're curious. You are not, again, going back into lack and questioning where you are, versus you're saying, how can I stay into action? Because that's where creation happens, when you're in action. Not when you're questioning your actions, when you're questioning things around you. When you're in movement and in action is when you get to create. So that's why you're always fairly compensated. It's a hard pill to swallow, I know. Anybody who's listening is like, what are you talking about, bro? Like, I work so hard, I do many so hours, and I totally recognize that. But that's not what, compensation is not a function of hard work. Compensation is a function of skill.
Talk to me about the principle of infinite abundance.
So another principle that is harder for people to swallow, especially in modern times because of the noise that we get to hear, is that we live in infinite abundance, that there is more to go around that we can ever really take from that abundance. It's like an ocean, and what we feel or we struggle with is that we feel like, oh, there's only that much water. No, there's so much water that you can potentially, everybody can be very wealthy and very rich and very comfortable in their lives, but we don't operate from that belief. Most of us operate from a belief of that there is a limited amount of money to go around and we must get a piece of that. But if you really think about it, and this is fascinating for me, I think in 2008, when the economy crashed, the size of economy that has 1.5x by the time we hit 2024. So let's assume the economy, it was 1 in 2008 when the economy crashed, right? So theoretically, it's really bad times. We should have gone down a sink, right? And economy-wise, we should have taken years to even come back to normal, to come back to 1, right? Because we went a net negative after that. The economy crashed for like 3 years or something, right? The economy is 1.5 in just 20 years, so less than 20 years.
Wow.
Right? And that's kind of how much abundance there is in the world. Every reset, every challenge, every time you go, you know what? Oh, the economy is bad, or we are not making enough money, or there's not enough money to go around. I want you to look at data, like hard data. Every crash has given more and more to the world economy. Every time people have thought that there is not enough money to go around, there has been more money. And in a very short period of time, even the slowest economies have grown pretty fast. So my curiosity for anybody that is listening to this conversation is to understand that the universe has so much to give that you have not even tapped into maybe 1% of it.
Yeah.
And because we haven't tapped into even 1% of it, there is infinite abundance. There is so much more to be created. The resourcefulness and resources of humankind is infinite. And because of that, our ability to create is infinite. And because our ability to create is infinite, we have infinite abundance.
Okay, one last principle. What is the principle of sacrifice?
So principle of sacrifice is that to create anything new, one must sacrifice something of themselves. So this simply means there's parts of you that must be let go if you want to create more. And that becomes a struggle as well for us in our beingness, in our psychology, in our spirituality, is because we tend to think, oh, but I am this and this is who I am. But the thing with this is who I am is you're not giving yourself an opportunity to create something out of that little something that you have discovered about yourself. Most of us would go ahead and do a degree and then chase that degree till the end of our life. Well, that's not how abundance is created. Abundance comes from sacrifice, which effectively means that at some point you have to wake up to the idea that you being an engineer is not what's going to make you abundant. You becoming a manager of engineers makes you abundant. You becoming the CEO of the company makes you abundant. You then maybe getting equity in another startup makes you abundant. So it's about upgrades, and they don't come with the same skill or the same ability, same mindset that you started with. It comes in a completely different way of looking at life, and that effectively means you have to let go of parts of you for you to be able to unlock and operate from a different part of you.
How do we identify which of those parts we have to let go of?
So instead of thinking about what I have to let go of, if you start focusing on what do I need to learn, it allows you an easier way to kind of identify what parts are not working for you anymore. So for example, there's a friend of mine, and he had a huge challenge because there was some individuals, he's an entrepreneur, and there were some individuals who stole money from him. And so for the longest time, he couldn't trust people with money. He would think anybody who was trying to make a deal with him was trying to get better off him and trying to, sneak something from him and so on and so forth. So he, for 5-10 years, had this strong belief that people wanted to take advantage of him. And he thought that's how he was becoming more successful, because he was holding on to that belief. And so he would, not do a deal until he was 100% sure about it, and so on and so forth, which delayed his deals for a long time, until he realized that actually is not a superpower. Being careful doesn't mean that you doubt people. It just means you're being careful, which means you may read the contract, but you don't have to doubt that everybody's trying to sneak in a deal or a point in the contract that is out to get you.
Yeah.
Right? You can have a much easier understanding, a much easier life, and much easier dealings with other people if you trust them. Right? And on a core level. And of course, you're being careful, but you trust them. And so the day he shifted that, he had to let go of his old belief of everybody's out to get him. Right? It was helpful to him for that short period of time when he was in crisis, but the same belief system wasn't helpful when he was not in crisis. And that's true for anything in life. Is if, let's say right now, economy is in a certain place, in a certain state, it may need your other parts of you to kind of trigger up and come in because it's helpful to the company. Let's say there's a popular term we use in some of our companies, where it's wartime and peacetime CEO. And peacetime CEO is when company is going good. Like the growth is good, campaigns are going good, products are doing good, everything is doing good, right? And so in peacetime, the operating principles are different. Operating principles are follow the system, follow the process, don't break the process, keep growing, keep building on the process. A wartime CEO has to kick in when any of those parts don't work anymore. Mm-hmm. Like you have a process that was working and now it doesn't work, and because of that, say you have a profit drop or a revenue drop, whatever it might be. Suddenly you have to become a wartime CEO, which means you have to look at everything again and be able to re-engineer it, right? And be able to re-engineer it requires a very different part of you than the part of you that was just hoping that the process will just work, right? And for both of those things, you need a very different part of you to be unlocked, and a very different part of you. You can't be a wartime CEO in a peacetime company. The moment you do that, you're going to burn out your talent, because your talent's going to be like, what the hell? Why do I have to constantly be on an edge? Whereas a peacetime CEO can't run a wartime company. It's not possible, because they'll be so chill about it that it's not going to work, right? So you have to know which parts of you are going to be activated for what part. But at any given time, you ask yourself, what's the outcome that you want for your life, and identify the skills for it and start developing those. And you will find that there are certain parts of you that doesn't work very well with those skills and with those abilities.
What are the common myths about creating abundance?
There are many myths about creating abundance, but let's see. First of them is that you can save to become wealthy. You can save your way to wealth. It just takes a long time. It's not necessarily untrue. You can save money and be wealthy one day, but it usually takes anywhere between 10 to 30 years, depending on what's wealthy for you. So that's kind of a lie, I think, a little bit, because most people don't think about it that way. Like most of us don't go, yep, I'll love to be wealthy in 20 years from now. I don't think that's how most of us really want to operate or do operate or are comfortable with that notion. Some of us are, but most of us are not. So the better understanding to have is you create more abundance by making more money. What does that mean? And it doesn't mean you have to be an entrepreneur, which is, again, a default that everybody goes to. Is like, oh, just become an entrepreneur, you'll make more money. Actually not. Most entrepreneurs will not be wealthy in the next 5 or 10 years. It's no way. Because in entrepreneurship, you create wealth once you have crossed a certain threshold of revenue. And that usually tends to be, I would say, between 5 and 10 million is when you get your first good paychecks. And the reason for that is because before that, you're setting up everything, you're barely making any, or you're making and you have a bad month and then you lose money. So good checks are after $4 or $5 million. If you're thinking about $1 million check, I mean, you can still get checks for a couple of $100,000 if you are doing 3 million or 2 million in revenue, something like that. But so entrepreneurship is not the fast track to make money. You make money either when you hit a certain revenue stride, which takes a minute to get to, or if you sell your business, which again is you have to start the right business to be able to sell it, and who knows what the payday is and so on and so forth. So entrepreneurship is popularized as the way to become wealthy, but it's not the smartest way to be wealthy. The smartest way to be wealthy is upskilling yourself within a job. There are more millionaires who stayed in jobs than people who became entrepreneurs.
Wow.
Because more millionaires are people who were MDs of the company. There are more millionaires who were CEOs of companies, COOs of the company, senior talent of a company, people who joined a startup and had some equity in the startup, and the startup became big. And their lives are a lot more joyous than the founders or the co-founders' life is. Because founders and co-founders have to be wired a particular way. They have a problem almost. Like I would say they're tortured in their minds a little bit, because they are constantly on the edge of creating something new. They can't sit still. They have a problem with not having a problem. And so because of that, they're kind of tortured a little bit. And I think some entrepreneurs also openly claim it, that they're tortured people. And that I think Elon Musk famously said recently, you don't want to be in my mind, it's hell, or something like that. And it's not only true for him, it's true for most entrepreneurs, because it is constant narrative of I have to solve something, or I have to solve a problem, I have to solve or create something. And that's not, if you don't have the mind for it, you don't want to be in that mind. So don't be an entrepreneur. You can be, if you are wired that way. It's great, it's awesome. You get a payday one day, and it's a really big payday, which is why all the glamour stories come off entrepreneurs. But that's not the natural, easy path. Maybe 5%, maybe 10% of entrepreneurs ever really see that success. Right? So 90% don't. But if you stay in a job and keep upskilling yourself, keep fulfilling the white spaces, you are more likely to be a millionaire in the next 10 years or 15 years just because you'll make more, because you're highly skilled, and you will have a lot more sustenance, a lot more joyous life, because you can clock out. Entrepreneur cannot clock out. They don't have the capacity to do it. They don't have the ability to do it. The responsibility is too big for them to be able to do it. But an employee can. And so that's one thing to note is you don't save yourself, you don't save money to become wealthy. You can, but that's not the optimal path. The optimal path is find the job and find the skills that will keep upgrading you. And that's how you become wealthy over time.
There's also the myth that only rich get richer, and if you grew up poor, then you will be poor. Say more about that.
So the interesting part is that when somebody says rich people get richer and poor people stay poor, it's because of a understanding that the person's environment impacts their reality. And there is some truth to that. There's some truth to that. But what a rich person doesn't often have, which a poor person often has, is what is called drive. Like their pure hunger and their chip on their shoulder is so strong that it's only possible when you grow up in extreme circumstances. So there's an advantage to growing up in a reality where you are not as abundant as you could potentially be, or your potential is for. So what happens with that? So firstly, it's untrue, really, that rich people will stay rich because they are a rich environment, or poor people will stay poor because of their environment. It is a possibility, but it's not an absolute truth. Rich people stay richer because of the environment for a longer period of time because of the social containers they have around them. That's really the reason why. The reason why people invest so much money in going to these schools, Harvard and the Ivy Leagues and so forth, and they want to, donate a building or whatever, is not because they are better education. Maybe there is a little bit better education. I don't know. I've never been to them to study myself, but the reason why you go there is because of people that you get to meet there. So you go and hang out with the smartest of the talent, because there's a pool of people that are just coming because their fathers were rich or their mothers were rich, right? Their family was rich, let's just say it that way. And then the other pool is the hyper brilliant, right? So the hyper brilliant meet these people who can invest in this hyper brilliance, right?
Yeah.
And now because they're investing in these really, really brilliant people, they all become richer, right? But these brilliant people still can come from really poor backgrounds, right? They're not limited by they're just talented, right? So it doesn't mean this is a cohesive environment where you can still benefit from whatever's happening around you. So you can change your environment even if you grew up poor through education, or also just simply by changing the place you live, right? Even if you just change your neighborhood, sometimes that allows you to meet better people who have a better mindset and then allow you to expand from where your current consciousness is. It's not poor people will stay poor and rich people will stay rich. It is about who they hang out with that will define what happens next, right? And that's why your past is not predictive of your future. Your past is predictive of where you are right now. Not even predictive. It just tells you, informs you why you are where you are, but it has absolutely zero influence into your future till the time you're willing to change. So that's the essence of that. It's the environment, and so change the environment and you change your reality.
What about you have to be smart to be rich? What about that myth?
The narrative of you have to be smart to be rich comes from the idea of intelligence in the context of college education and so forth. And again, it's been disproven enough times, because most millionaires, not most, but a lot of millionaires have no college education, have no college background, and it's perfectly okay for them to make wealth. They just make wealth differently. So you don't have to be smart, because again, while talking to students and while talking to coaches and people we have trained, what we have found is a lot of people go, oh, math is hard. And that's why I look at a spreadsheet and I scare off. It's your programming. It's got nothing to do with the math that is on the spreadsheet. Math for abundance or for wealth is 5th grade math. It's not complex math. It's basically you need addition, subtraction, percentages, and then some compound interest. So compound interest is the most complicated thing that you would do for abundance. And everything else is pretty easy, pretty straightforward. It's just numbers. You get fearful of numbers because there's an association of higher education math that you did, which you probably failed at. And so you think numbers are hard. Numbers are actually not hard. Numbers are really, really easy to do, but you have a fear for it. And so you think, oh, I have to be incredibly smart to make investments. I have to be incredibly smart to do this magical thing that these rich people do. There's nothing magical rich people are doing. There's no complex numbers. And if you really dedicate a little bit of energy towards understanding the practicality of money, which is to understand how a budget works, what are investments, how to make them, you don't actually have to know the complexity of it all. It's very simple systems. So we as we're talking, we're developing a program. We've developed a program. We're promoting it right now called Certified Money Coach, where what we have done is we have taken the intelligence of spirituality of money, psychology of money, and practicality of money, and we have blended it together. Because if you learn these 3 elements or these 3 levels of money, you're able to create whatever abundance you want to create for yourself. Practicality of money in that entire program is maybe 3 weeks. It's a 16-week program. And the reason it's only 3 weeks is because that's all you need to know. And everybody just talks about it all the time, but it's really that simple. That's the last thing you want to waste your time on, is practicality of money. It's so simple, so standard, that if you actually focus on your psychology and spirituality, you will be way more abundant than if you thought about, oh, I'm going to time the market, should I invest in cryptocurrency and all that bullshit that comes in our lives. That's practicality of money. If you know your philosophy of money clearly, you can do the practicality of money in 2 hours in a month, maybe even less. Maybe that starting is 2 hours a month, but eventually a couple of minutes in a year and you're good. It's sorted. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah. What about the myth of I'm too old to be wealthy now? I know that, a lot of people think that their time has passed and they're too old to be wealthy now. What about that?
The funny thing about wealth is with age, you get wealthier. So even if you have not had a chance right now to be able to build wealth as a younger person or as an older person, what you have now is so much experience of life that if you implement it and if you apply it to the right field, you will become abundant faster. Right? What a 30, 40-year-old could do right now versus what a 60-year-old could do right now is vastly different. A 60-year-old can become abundant in the next 5. For a 40-year-old, it might take 10. So it's actually a different game. It does require you to utilize everything that you've learned until now into something that's actionable. I'm not saying that's applicable for everyone, but for most people, it's very, very applicable because by the time you're 50 or 60 and you're retired or retiring or will retire in 10 years, you are looking at a set of skills, a set of abilities, set of certainty that you probably didn't have in your 40s or in your 30s. And so your ability to make money dramatically increases as you age. You may not think that because your belief around why you shouldn't be rich has also strengthened over that time. And so you feel like, oh, there's no way I can get around to it. There's no way I can actually be wealthy. But actually, it's much easier for you to be wealthy as you go older because you know the right people already. You are in conversations with them already. You just need to learn the smaller parts of the skills that you may not have paid attention to. So like, for example, one of the greatest skills that nobody talks about in making wealth is negotiation. Is if you can negotiate, you can make a lot more than anybody else in a very short period of time, especially in the Western world. In India and some of the countries, negotiation is normal, so everybody negotiates. But if you negotiate right, even in those countries, you can actually be a lot more abundant faster. So let me give you a recent study. So I was with this friend of ours who's a podcaster, and I was doing a podcast episode with her, and we were talking about negotiation. And I just gave her some ways of how a person can negotiate and how most people wouldn't. And so she sends me a text after our podcast, but she does some events in Miami. And she goes, Ajit, you remember our conversation about negotiation on the podcast? I was like, yeah. You're like, Ajit, I used to pay 20 grand to book this venue for my events every month.
Wow.
I negotiated, because of our conversation, the same venue for $8,500.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is one conversation. Just the idea that you can negotiate everything. It wasn't even all the tools that we teach you, none of that stuff, because we were on a podcast. You can only go that much deeper. But we were able to give her just the idea of just negotiate. Like instead of just accepting the price you're being offered, just negotiate. Now, this person does events, right? So she sells tickets to these events. From $20,000 to $8,500, she's now able to generate an additional $12,000 or $11,500 in profit just by one conversation that took her an hour.
Yeah.
But this is every month. Over a year, she just generated 100 grand more.
Wow.
If you think about it.
Yeah.
Right? So is it worth it? Absolutely. 100 grand more. Who doesn't want 100 grand more?
Yeah.
And all it took was a couple of hours of, not even a couple of hours. I think it was like an hour of conversation and some texts.
Let's keep talking about the myths that people believe about money. I know that there are 2 relationship types with money, security or lifestyle. Can you say more about that?
The more I've researched it, and we have data to prove it as well, is if you really find the essence of why people want to make money. Because one of the questions that people don't answer is, why do you want money? Why? I mean, what's the point? And then you would get answers like, oh, I need to buy a house, I need to do this. And no, but why? In essence, what is it that tells you that you need more money or you want to make money? And we found broadly, based on the answers that we collected, that you could broadly categorize in 2 segments of people, or 2 motivations to make more money. One is because they want sense of security. Right? They want to feel safe. So money makes them feel safe. And so they want to make more money so they can feel more safe. And that's basically it. The other is lifestyle. By lifestyle, it simply means I want to be able to blank. And because they want to be able to blank, they want more money. Right? So they live life in a very lifestyle way, right? Now you would find that either of those 2 people or categories of people can get to a place of feeling broke or being actually broke pretty quickly, right? The person who's seeking security will always feel broke because they will never feel, if they don't have a number in their head of what safe security number is, which most people don't think about, is if you don't know your security number, you'll always feel broke because you'll go, oh, I don't have enough.
Right. Because you haven't gotten clear on what your number is.
You don't know what your number is. You don't know what makes me feel secure. You don't even know security is what your driver is, right? So what tends to happen is they would go save. Now they have a really big safety account or the investment account, but they have no expression in life. Like they don't enjoy life. They don't really travel. They're not doing anything with their money. It just sits in a bank account. It's like one of those things. We often hear stories of, not often, but sometimes, where there was a garbage man with $5 million in his bank account when he died. And I was like, why?
Why wasn't he living his life?
Because he was security driven. He was like, I don't know what to do with this money. I just want to save for the one rainy day. And then one day they just die and the rainy day never happened.
Right.
So the $5 million just sits there.
Versus the lifestyle approach.
Versus the lifestyle approach, which is another thing. They are broke most of the time because they always spend the money.
Yeah.
And so they have no way of really balancing it out. And so they're incredibly resourceful individuals. But most people who feel broke are lifestyle people, or are actually broke are lifestyle people, because they often go, oh, I'd really think, you know what, I want that trip to Ibiza. I really want to attend that event for $10,000 while I have $10,000 in my bank account. Well, you can go attend the event, but then guess what happens right after the event? You're like, I don't have any money anymore. Right? So I'm back into the cycle. So they're constantly broke because they are living their life as a lifestyle without understanding that there is a dance that is to be had between security and lifestyle.
So what's the other option? If we're not shooting for security or lifestyle, then what's the other option?
We're balancing for both.
Okay.
Right? And that's why it's important to know what's really important for security and what's really important for lifestyle. Right? So here's what one must inquire between themselves. Firstly, what's your security number?
Okay.
Right, which most people would go, $1 million, Ajit. I'm like, no, not really, because let's see how much do you really need every month right now. Let's say if you were living your life right now comfortably, well, how much money you need, right? In America, that tends to be anywhere between, depending on the city that you're living in, anywhere between $3,000 to $8,000. Now, if you go New York or LA in a more nicer area, of course, it will keep going up, but that's good lifestyle. Somewhere between $3,000 to $8,000. You can live a very good lifestyle, or depending on the city that you're living in, or the place and the resources you have. All right. So if that's the money you need to make enough money that you are generating that much on a dividend or an annual gain basis, right? Dividend or on earning basis based on a safe enough investment. So safe enough investment is about, you can expect anywhere between 7 to 10% return. That you can get more, but I'm talking about being really conservative investments in the market, right? So let's say 8% return is what you're looking for in the market if you invest, in American market especially. Over time, what will happen is let's say you'll work for another 20 or 30 years, you would have enough money for you to sustainably live for that 3, 5, 7,000, whatever amount of money that you really need to be able to survive comfortably. So that's what your security number is. So first you need to know what your number is. So just to give you a cleaner example, if let's say 3,000 is your number, right? That means you need about $36,000 in a year, right? So to say if you were making 10% return on annual basis, you need to invest about $360,000 to make $36,000 in your annual return of net gain, right? This is not the money you're drawing out. This is just simple math to kind of make sense of, oh, that's what my security number could be like, right? Because when you hit that security number, what you'll notice is you can even stop investing at that time, but you're not going to stop working, right? Which means your investment will compound over time, right? Because it's still gaining 10% year on year, which means it's adding 36,000, but now it's 360,000 plus 36,000, which is almost 400,000. Now that's compounding at 10%. Now you're getting 40,000.
Wow.
Right? So every year you're compounding. That's why I said compound interest is probably the most complex thing you have to do. But if you run it on a chat GPT or an Excel sheet, it's like a one simple formula that you have to add.
Yeah.
And you would get the number of how does it compound over time. And you would realize that to get to, say, 300,000 in savings may take you 10 years if you set that as a goal and say every year I must save this much so I can get 300,000 by the end of 10 years. Much more achievable, especially if you consider that you're working to make more money, not just save money, right? It's because that's we talked about previously on this conversation. So that's knowing your security number, and then to know what makes your lifestyle really feel alive. The challenge, again, because we don't define it for the year or for current life that we are in, we react to what's happening in front of us. Right? So say, for example, like I know, and me and my wife talk about our lifestyle goals all the time, including our security goals and lifestyle goals. And we go, we love attending events together. How many do we want to do this year? Right? Now you know how much money you need for it. Right? We love doing personal development events. We love meditating. We love doing all these crazy things.
Yeah.
But you define it. And once you define it, you know your amount. So you know, hey, this much money we need for doing these things that we want to do. Can we afford it this year? If the answer is yes, great. If we can't afford it this year, well, let's learn how to make more money.
Oh, I love that.
Right? So we'll learn how to make more money. And then if we can't afford it this year, we can afford it next year. Right? So you got to know what does make your lifestyle feel like your ideal lifestyle, and take out anything that just is for the world outside, which is the challenge most of us have. When we define lifestyle, a lot of us have things in lifestyle that doesn't make us happy, but makes it look good. And you don't want that in your lifestyle goals, because make us look good is a downward trend to losing all your money. Because eventually there's a point where you just don't look good to anyone.
You're just
because
keeping
it's
up
your
with
story.
the Joneses. Yeah.
Yeah, keeping up with Joneses. But Joneses are not even watching. So you're not keeping up with nobody.
Yeah.
You feel that, oh, they had this lifestyle goal and they are achieving it, I must have it. But what you are doing is you're looking at Joneses and that Edwards and then Navalkas and then whoever else is. And now you have 4 different families that you're comparing to and trying to hit all of their lifestyle goals in your lifestyle. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
I mean, there is infinite abundance, but there is also life, right? There's also practicality of implementation of infinite abundance. And yes, you can have money to live all 4 lifestyles in one. I'm blessed. I think I live like that without actually comparing myself to anyone. But you got to ask that there is a timeline for it to be achieved. And sometimes you got to delay that so you can actually enjoy the life while maintaining security. So the dance of security and lifestyle is where most of us struggle. We either fall very hard on security or we fall really hard on lifestyle, and either of us makes us feel broke.
What spiritual practices can enhance your ability to create wealth?
There are so many practices that allow us to create wealth. First, I would say, is acceptance and gratitude. I think when you start to accept for what is and start to be grateful for what is, it allows you to be in this state of love and the state of joy and a state of just beingness in whatever that is, that it allows for you to let abundance flow towards you, because you're just in that state, and the state really, really is helpful towards actions and beingness of a person. Then the second thing that I would say is when things are flowing at you, because you're in a state of of acceptance and gratitude, you need to learn not to fight it. And most of us fight when we are being dropped into an insight, the whispers that we hear, the intuition that is calling us, the direction that we are being nudged towards. We fight it because it doesn't follow a path. It doesn't make rational sense. And sometimes rational sense is not what you want to follow. You want to still follow what your heart really wants you to do, what it's really calling you to do. And because of that, because we don't listen to it, because we're not so present to it, it sometimes doesn't allow us to be able to be as creative as we need to be, or listen to something that has a bigger opportunity for us. And lastly, I would say sometimes we get really stuck in the how. And how is not helpful when we are deciding towards something that's a calling, a direction, a spiritual direction, a movement towards something. The how is the easy part, but how is what we care for the most. The how is something that becomes so obvious when you are in movement, but it's so hard when you're not in movement. So very often, and our people tend to be coaches, life coaches, business coaches, health coaches, people who are trying to impact humanity. And their greatest blessing is also their greatest demon, is because they are so intelligent, if I may call them that, or they are so present to their stories, is they get sucked into it. Instead of being in action, they think, if I could just really find how to do X, whatever that is, like how can I remove my blocks, or how can I how can I learn how to do social media, or whatever the how-to that they've come up with in that moment, because that's the reason why it's not working out. Well, that's exactly why we take away action from us. And if you're not in action, you can't create. And when you're not in action, you can't find what is an actual how-to. See, for some reason, we as human beings believe that the other person knows what they're doing. And the answer is the other person knows maybe a little bit more about what they are doing for themselves, but that's pretty much where the buck stops, right? They know it for themselves. They don't know it for you. They know it for themselves. They can reflect with you. They can help you. They can coach you, but they can't know it. The knowingness is only present to you, which is why we are so beautifully in sync as oneness, but still so different as individuals, is we have to honor that, like you currently feel that you don't know what you're doing, nobody does. And that's perfectly okay. It is the way of how we create, is because when we don't know, we get to create from a place of just creation instead of create from a place of comparison or a place of what's right and what's wrong and judge things before we have taken action towards it. So my final point to how do you create is to really be able to stay in action and not worry about the how-to and let the how-to appear instead of intellectualize it.
What advice would you give to people who feel guilty or conflicted about their desire for wealth?
So if you feel guilty or conflicted about your desires, you got to ask yourself, where does it come from? And most of the time, if you really ask that question, you may find that there is a subconscious, unconscious narrative that runs in your mind. And that unconscious narrative often is not your narrative. It is an influencer's narrative that was in your life at some point. So it could be a father figure, it could be a mother figure, it could be an uncle, it could be a friend, it could be anything. But there's an influencer that has influenced your opinion about your desire, the current desire that you have, or the desires that you have been having. And that we call it the influencer behind the scenes technique, where we try to discover as to what is that person saying or said to me and why maybe they said it, right? What I found, and just to correlate it with a story, for the greatest time in my life, for the longest time in my life, I used to believe that my mother doesn't love me. I was a strong opinion that my mother doesn't love me. And because I believed that to be true, guess what happens? I, of course, am disconnected with my mother, but I'm also just disconnected with other people, because if the person that is giving you birth doesn't love you, you clearly are not lovable. And that's the story, right? And what I recognized over time is that that was just a story that I built up because of one event in my life, or one event or a set of events that were similar to each other, but I identified those events as the story and ignored everything else. So the story, that the topic or the idea that I picked from my mother's behavior was because she used to hit me. Not like hit me in a crazy way, but she would like to slap me if there was something that I was doing wrong from her point of view, right? And I remembered that, and because I remembered that, I thought, oh, she doesn't love me, right? But in that process, I forgot all the other things that she had done for me. She was also the same person who pawned her jewelry to send me to a conference because I really wanted to go.
Wow.
She's also the same person who would stay up late in the night to make sure I have a warm meal when I come back home. She's also a one who would wake up every morning, make me fresh food so I can take fresh food to my school. She's also the one who was the first person who said I should be on stage doing a dance performance at a party, but first person to put me on stage at like 7 years old or something, or 8 years old or something, right? So she has a lot of firsts and a lot of things that she did that was to my great benefit today. But at that moment, though, when I was only letting her influence one side of the story or one part of the story, I couldn't see that she loved me, right? And that's probably the case why you have shame for your desires, so you feel guilty for your desires, is because somebody somewhere, because of their own reality, did a thing or said a thing that you thought was the truth. Not the absolute truth, but the truth. And because you never questioned that truth, you today carry that truth as the absolute truth.
This story just blew my mind. We literally have the same story. I used to think the same exact way about my mother because she used to hit me, not in a crazy way, but definitely I've gotten a few beatings from my mother, and I've definitely thought to myself, I am not lovable because of that. And it's just kind of really emotional right now because I never realized how that belief influenced my own desire to have wealth and how much it stunted my desire, you know, and I would always make myself feel guilty. So I want to know, can someone consider stepping into a reality where they don't have this influence and live free from this story in their life, what are the actions that they have to take now, and how can they start practicing them today?
So for influencer behind the scenes, specifically for this technique, what you can do is first try to identify who's the person that influenced that narrative for you, where you feel like, oh, my desires are somehow I should be ashamed about them to have desires, or whatever that is that you believe. Find the influencer. Who is the person? And most of us are very aware of it because we've all done a little therapy in our lives now, or have worked with a coach in our life now. So become aware of that. And once you know the person, I want you to flip. This time, instead of just remembering the story, think about the person's reality. Right? If you take a minute, if this was, say, your father or your mother or an uncle or auntie or whatever it was, look at their story and their point of view. Right? So, for example, my father, for the longest time, forever actually in my life, always advocated that I should go get a job. Right? Now, I can take that story, and I did have a job for a long time. I was CEO of a company, and then I finally got into entrepreneurship. But until that time, I fought entrepreneurship and always kept a job along because I felt like, I don't know if I can just be an entrepreneur. But if I flip the story, it is because my father couldn't make his business successful, and he had to struggle all his life because of it, right? And like we talked about previously, 90% of entrepreneurship will never make a successful career out of it. Right? They won't make a lot of money. They'll make some money, but it won't be a lot. Right? So once I look at my father's story or background, I can go, oh, you were not telling me the truth of life. You were telling me your truth based on your experiences, based on your reality, which effectively means you have a biased opinion about this one thing. Right? So he has a biased opinion about entrepreneurship because in his experience, entrepreneurship is hard.
Right.
It doesn't work. He worked really, really hard. He used to do 12-hour days, and he never made enough for us to, live very comfortably. Like, we were okay, but not like we didn't live in abundance, right? And he couldn't make it work. So in his mind, of course, it feels like, you should just go get a job. It's so much safer. It's more consistent. And that is how one must live their life. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, because I also advocate you could become very wealthy being an employee. But the point really is that there is an influencer, and they have a reason to influence you in the way they did. There's a story they had. And once you understand that they have that story, now you can reflect into that, is that story really true? Right? So when I question, I was like, okay, my dad couldn't make businesses work, but is business actually a bad thing? Now, if you look for evidence and you become almost like a detective trying to figure it out, you become your Sherlock Holmes of your own type, you go and find and you talk to other entrepreneurs and you say, is entrepreneurship really impossible? And any entrepreneur will say it's really hard. It's not easy. You have to work, at least in the initial run, and then you get good at it. And when you get good at it, it gets easy. And when you get good at it, you make a lot of money, and you make it faster than you did in your first business. So it's not your first business that really will make you wealthy. It probably is your second or third that will make you significantly wealthy. It's not starting a business that makes you successful or wealthy. It's selling the business that makes you successful or wealthy. It's not the first 3 or 5 years where you make the money. It's the first 10 years that you make money. Mm-hmm. All of those things that you will start to find out as you talk to entrepreneurs, and suddenly you go, oh, okay, no, that was my dad's truth. And it was true for him. Of course, he couldn't figure it out, or he was in the right circumstances, didn't do the right things, cared for other people too much, whatever the story, right? It's his story. It's not true. The evidence suggests that, yes, this is part of the story and can happen, but so can all these other things, right? Now you're fighting evidence with evidence. Now you don't have to let the influencer influence you because you've found hard evidence that the influencer was biased.
There's so much freedom in that.
There's freedom.
Yeah.
Because now you go, oh, okay, so you did the best you could. I'm not blaming you for it. I am simply saying, but that's just part of the truth.
Yeah.
And if it's just part of the truth, that means I can pursue the other part of the truth.
Yeah.
Which is business can be successful, that you have to take a chance, and that it has all these caveats. And if you continue to work with the caveats, you will probably find success. So I think that's where that kind of leans in, is if once you break that story of the influencer behind the scene, you are able to accept it a lot more, and you're able to move towards your desires a lot more.
All right. So last question, and I love this question. Are rich people just lucky?
So absolutely not. The more I studied rich people, and I consider myself pretty wealthy as well at this point, what I have realized is it's actually not true at all. Rich people are not lucky. It's just they have a really good practice or good practices or set of practices that they have around. The first set of practices is what I call 3 Ls or L3, right? The first L is that they actually love money. Like most rich people actually are in love with money. Not loving money to do bad things or whatever. They just love money. They like the flexibility. They like the lifestyle. They want to be able to experience things. They just love money. They have no dissociation or money is evil kind of stories in their mind. They don't. They just love money, and they are okay with loving money. They may not say it publicly because it's often looked down upon, but they love money, right? The second L is that they learn about money. They're not somebody who just reads a book, but they read many. They sit with people and talk about money. They're comfortable with sitting down with a financial advisor and talk to them for 3 hours, even if they're not understanding a word of what he's saying, because financial advisors often try to confuse the crap out of you for whatever reason. But they love to learn about money. So they all keep asking questions until they've gotten to what the hell does that one thing that somebody's talking about mean, and is it valuable or not? Right? So they love learning about, they love money and they learn about money. And the third thing, which I think is the most important thing that most people cannot do, is they know how to linger with money.
Ooh.
They just know how to sit with money. They don't have a problem if they have money in their bank account. They don't have a problem if their credit card is not being utilized enough. They can sit with money. They can sit with a lot of money in their bank account without having a problem with it. They can have a big investment account and they don't need to go buy anything. They're not fascinated by the outside glitz and glamour. And I'm talking about real wealthy people. I'm not talking about the people who look wealthy. I'm talking about people who are wealthy. People who are wealthy are not affected by the latest car. They don't give a shit. They can linger with money, which means they can sit with money without having to do anything with it.
Why is that so important to learn how to linger with money?
It's probably one of the most important things. That's why most people live in debt, especially in America. I mean, if you talk to Americans, most Americans, and I think numbers, average American is in debt of, I think, $5,000 at any given time, or whatever number, something like that at least. And this is not included, this is credit card debt is what I'm talking about. They usually have $1,000 to $5,000 in credit card debt at any given time that they cannot pay off immediately, or they don't have even $1,000 in their savings account. Now, that's because we don't know how to sit with money. We just have no idea what to do. The moment we make a little bit of money, we immediately go and spend on something that we don't even need, right? And the resources or the ability around us has created even more structures that makes it harder for us to be able to linger with money. So, and that really challenges a person, and so they can't. And this is a learned skill. You need to learn how to linger with money. If you can learn just how to sit with money, you'll just be wealthy just by that, because you actually will be like, I don't have to spend it. The second key that I've seen rich people do is what I call DPS. DPS is dream, pursue, and skills. What does that mean? First of all, wealthy people always have a dream. You can talk to them at any given time. They have a dream. And they have a dream that they really pursue. They are not just saying, oh, this is my dream, and then it's the same dream three years later. No, they've already pursued it, and they've gotten somewhere. Either they have quit it or they have actually got it, right? So it's or they're moving towards it, or they will get it very, very soon. So they have a dream and then pursue it. But most importantly, they're always acquiring valuable skills that upgrades and moves them towards their dream, so they can have the dream come true. This last part of skills, again, is the tricky part. Most of us would go get a degree, will go get a job, and keep functioning in that role for a very, very long time. We don't realize that if you don't upgrade your skill level, the job is only going to pay you that much. And that's okay. That's fine if that's where your comfort is at and that's what you want to do. But if you dream of a big dream, and if you want to make more money than you have made today, or you want to make more money in the next 5 years than you're making today, then you gotta have a high value skill. A high value skill is a skill that is valued out in the market higher than what your current value is, right? Every skill has a value, and the specialization of skills give you some more value. But what really gives you more value is your ability to communicate, connect with people, manage people, and manage a complex project, or if not complex, at least a project, right? Or simplify something that's complicated. That's really where the value sits. That's where you get paid. You don't really get paid just because you're a good worker, which is, again, a common theme. Like, people think, oh, I will just work hard. That doesn't get you paid more. That can get you paid more a little bit, but only that much more. What really gets you paid is your ability and your skills. So you got to keep upgrading your skills. Your skills must be better than yesterday, every single day.
And what's the third thing? I know you have an acronym called HAT.
Yes. So HAT stands for hard work. Not hard work doesn't pay, smart work does. And you've heard it a million times, but most of the time we don't know what's the distinction between them. Hard work is where you are basically just working more hours, right? So 10, 12 hours a day, you're just working, you're going at it. That's hard work. Nothing wrong with it. It is something that is required when you're in your 20s, maybe your early 30s, when you're developing skill and attitude and you're finding out what you really want. Yes, you need to work hard. Very, very, very hard. But once you start to hit 35 and 40, you got to ask yourself, did I actually acquire any skills? Because if you did, you better switch to what is called smart work. Smart work is your ability to do the most important things in a short period of time, because nothing else matters. Your ability to simplify is what really creates momentum. See, many people get fascinated when they learn that I only work maybe 4 hours a day for 4 days a week, maybe 5 sometimes, right? Except for odd days sometimes, like today we have to do this on a Sunday. That's mostly because I'm on a holiday next week all week. So stuff like that happens, but generally, if you look at my schedule, it's 4 days a week, 4 hours a day. That's it. After that, I go work out, I go spend time with my family, I go to spend time with my friends, I travel, and I take 3-4 days off every single week. And the reason I could make that work, or the reason why it works for me, is because I only work on the most important things, right? Because I've acquired skills at this point, and I keep acquiring them consistently, that I don't have to do everything else. I have to only do those very important things, because that moves the needle a lot more than anything else. See, 80% of the world at this point is what I would call an intellectual worker. An intellectual worker is somebody who takes in information, processes it, and spits out a different set of information. That's what most of us do in today's world, right? Except if you're working for a restaurant and you're a chef or something like that, right? That's maybe 20%, maybe 30% of the world does that. But about 60, 70% of the world is in intellectual work, right? We're doing some kind of processing of information. If you are processing information, there's no point for you to work 12-hour days. Your ability to process information significantly declines after 3-4 hours of good work. If it's not good work, it is there till the end of the day, because you never used your brain. If you used your brain and you did intellectual work, you probably exhausted all its capacity 4 or 5 hours down, right? Which is also why when entrepreneurs say I'm working 12 hours, they're often not actually working. They're mostly in communication. They're mostly communicating. Right? When you see a CEO saying, look at my day in the life of CEO. I started at 8 in the morning and I ended at 8 p.m. in the night. Firstly, that's terrible for them. But secondly, even if that's the life they desire, it's mostly because guess what they were doing for those 12 hours? They were meeting people. They were never sitting on a computer writing an email. Maybe they did that for an hour.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. Rest of the time, they were in communication. They are producing that's a highly valuable skill. It's communication, right? They're not actually working that we call for more than 2-3 hours a day, right? On their computer? No, they never. And that's what exhausts you. Communication doesn't exhaust you. You sitting down having an intellectual conversation stimulates you.
Yeah.
You can do that for 12-hour days. You can't really sit on a computer work for 12-hour days. They're not really working. From the way people perceive work is what I'm trying to say. So you have to switch from hard work to smart work at some point in your career. The first 5-10 years of your career, maybe 15 years of your career, you will be working hard. But that's mostly because you're acquiring those skills. It's not actually that you're working, you're acquiring skills. And if you're not acquiring skills, you got to question the work you're doing.
And then there's also the area of work.
The second key is the area of work, which is what is the field that you've chosen? If you chose to become the best server in the world, well, that field is not going to pay you that much, right? Because you could be at a Michelin star restaurant, but your income is still sealed out to a certain degree.
Yeah.
With tips and whatever, it's still sealed out at some point, right? So there is the area of work. I'm not trying to discount that field. It's great if that's what your fuel is, you like doing it, you absolutely should do it. I'm not questioning it, but you must know that the field of work or the area of work you chose defines how much money you're going to make, right? So If you chose to be a server at a restaurant, you can be best at it, but you will make that much money, right? And then you will cap out, right? So that's what the field of work means. But if you, let's say in today's time, let's say you become a AI specialist currently, at least for the short term, I don't know if it'll be valuable for the long term. The short term, you become an AI specialist, you will have an increase in income right away.
Yeah.
Right? You become a coach, highly valued skill, your income will go up 100%. Why? Because it's a human-to-human connection. Most people will struggle as times get easier in life, and life gets easier. We struggle more and more because mentally we don't know how to deal with it. Right? And so if your field of work is something like coaching, which is in a human-to-human interaction, human-to-human performance tangent, your income is only going to grow with time, right? Because it becomes more and more valuable as you do more and more years of coaching.
Right.
You become more and more talented, you become more and more valuable as a person, so you'll tend to make more money just because you were in the field of coaching, right? It's the area of coaching. But if you want to make even more money, let's say you had a creative bend of mind and you became the best musician in the world, well then yes, you'll make even more money. So area of work is definitive in actually creating more abundance for you. So you got to pick your area. You must be passionate about it, of course, but also know what's important to you.
Yeah.
Like for example, you can be not passionate about work of certain things, but you can make a lot more money in it. Sometimes.
How so?
So I was talking to a friend. So let me give you a case study. This friend is from India. And he says, Ajit, I have the opportunity to own mines, coal mines or some kind of mines, a granite mine, something like that in India. I have a friend who has the government contracts, so I think like 4 mines or 5 mines where we have to mine the stuff. I'm really good at what I do, which is organizing things. He's a really organized person. He can manage people really well. He's just highly skilled individual, right? So highly skilled individual in people and communications. So this friend of his who has got the contract says, dude, I can't implement it. I have this other business, but I have got the contract. I filed this contract. I've got it. So I've got the mines too. I'll love to have you come in as a partner and run the whole thing, right? And this is granite mines, which are really large mines, which require a certain process and system. But the turnover of such things is millions in the first year, right? Because you're literally mining, right? It's just the scale of the industry is that large. The area of work is that large that you could mine granite and you will be a millionaire in about a year.
Okay.
He's not passionate about it, but he can be a millionaire in it because of his skill.
So is he going to do it?
No, because he wants to pursue the passionate career.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, so that's why it's important to know what's important.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you wanted to make money, it was purely about, hey, I just want to make money. I don't care about passion. My passion is to play guitar, and that's what I do at my home. I don't need to perform it. That's what I'm passionate about. Everything else I do for money. Let's say if that was the narrative, he should go to the granite mines. He'll be a millionaire in about a year. Nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
Right? Everything is about answering the question of what's important to me. Like today, I know I'll be much wealthier if I just change my career.
Really?
Yeah, I'm really valuable to CEO of any type of company, right?
Yeah.
And CEOs get paid really well. I can be at least 3 times more wealthy in about 3 years from now if I just change my industry.
So
if I join tech, if I join process, any kind of process or any kind of retail, I would crush it because I'm really organized. I know how to use advanced technology. I'm amazing with people. I can coach my entire executive staff. I can be a leader even if I don't start as a CEO. I can be the CEO in about 5 years.
But are you passionate about it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why I won't do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you got to ask yourself the question is what's important. I would say if money was important to me, I have a much easier way by switching careers.
Yeah.
I can make a lot more money not doing what I do.
Yeah.
Right? Or doing that, but in a very tight frame of an organization. Because what is a good CEO? Is a phenomenal coach. That is what a good CEO is.
Yeah.
A good CEO is somebody who can bring people together. I can bring people together. People stay with me if they work with me for at least 5 to 7 years. I'm really good at it in working with people and drawing out performance from them. I'm really good at organizing structures. I'm very good at organizing companies. I'm a great communicator. I can speak on stage. So I can inspire people. I'm very qualified to make up at least 3 times more money than what I'm making today. But I'm not passionate about it. I'm driven by passion. Not everybody's driven by passion.
Yeah.
And doesn't have to be either. You don't have to be passionate about to be rich. And not all rich people are passionate about what they do. And it's perfectly okay for you to do that if your drive is to just be rich. At some point, you got to ask why you want to be rich. right? And if that fuels somehow and that's more fuel, more power to you.
Yeah.
It's okay. Not everybody has to be passionate about everything. It's perfectly okay if you're okay with it. That's my comfort, right? But I know somebody who's listening to this conversation is probably a passionate person, which is why they're listening to two coaches talking, right?
Yeah.
And so they're like, oh, I want to be passionate about coaching. Then yes, absolutely. You can be rich being passionate about stuff too. Like my friend that I'm talking about who's not choosing to start a granite mine, he's still a millionaire.
Yeah.
He will be even a bigger millionaire faster is when he would do the non-passionate work. He's not going to do it because it's like, I don't care about the money.
But that's freedom right there to be able to choose.
Yeah. Like savings for me. I know I can make more money doing something else, but I don't care.
Yeah.
Like I want to be happy doing what I'm doing. I want to be fulfilled doing what I want to do. And that's my drive, right? So it's not either or. That whole narrative, you have to be passionate to be rich, it's untrue.
Yeah.
You can be passionate and be rich. That's true. Yes, you can make money with your passion and your purpose, but you don't have to if you're talking purely about wealth and money.
Yeah. Any final thoughts that you want to say about spirituality and money to anyone listening?
Yes, understand that there are 3 levels of money change. First is spirituality. Not that you have to start there, you can start anywhere, but spirituality is one of the most important components of money, but so is psychology. Psychology of money is to understand that there are certain beliefs you have garnered and you have in your life right now, and until you challenge them and accept the new ones, it'll be hard for you to change. The practicality, which is the 3rd level of change of money, which is the most common that people think, oh, only if I save 10%, I would be richer. It doesn't work that way. Practicality of money is the easiest part, but the practicality would never work if you don't work on psychology and spirituality of money. And that usually is the biggest reason why people can't make the practicality of money work, is they've been meaning to save, but they never get to save. They've been meaning to invest, but they don't get to invest. It's nothing to do with the practicality. You know the tools of practicality most of the time, but it's the psychology and spirituality that fails you. So with that, I want to make an invitation for anybody that's listening to this conversation right now is I am going to invest 4 months with you in helping you really reprogram all 3 levels, the practicality, the psychology, and spirituality. And I'll also show you how to coach anybody through that. And that is happening in what is a new program that we are doing with Mind Valley called Certified Money Coach. And this program comes with about 42 different tools and techniques that we give during the course of the program that help you break down your own belief system, re-challenge or recreate or realign yourself with the spirituality of money, and also a lot of practical things that you can implement right away. While I can't promise it, but I've noticed that when I have given these tools to my clients in different containers, in different contexts, they tend to increase their income by 15-20% within the scope of a year. So I'm not saying it's a lot, but it's a reasonable amount, especially for somebody that feels like they're being stunted and they're not really growing the amount of money that they're making. It's an interesting program to consider. So if you want to know more about it, there will be a link below. You can go check it out.
Awesome. Thank you, Ajit.
Thank you, Vas.